Fix China on its latitudes and move it along the longitudes, and one can see that its size, shape, and southernness is not all that different from the US is, and that reflects in its climate. Beijing's temperatures closely track with those of DC year-round, while Shanghai's reflect those of Atlanta. That's to say, China, like the US, is hot. Much of the US developed in an era of air conditioning. Florida, Texas, and Arizona had their biggest population influxes at a time when inside and out no longer correlated, and this is a direct contributor to the fact that the US today has the highest electricity consumption per capita of any major economy. China's marching down the same path. 2 out of every 5 air conditioning units made today are being sold to a Chinese person. Simply put, as personal income grows, air conditioning use grows, and so on the hottest of hottest days, some 50% of electricity consumption in China is now directly devoted to cooling down buildings. And this is only a single instance of a broader phenomena. Across the board, the exponential increase in electricity consumption as nations grow wealthier is a well-accepted and well-documented phenomenon. Other prosperous regions have found a tenuous equilibrium between wealth gains and efficiency gains. Europe and the US's year-over-year electricity consumptions have more or less plateaued, but China's looks like this. It's just growing and growing and growing. And most crucially, no country the size of China has ever, in history, developed at the speed of China. Its people are marching up the wealth pyramid at an unprecedented pace, and so too, of course, is its electricity consumption. This has led to difficulties. China is no stranger to the occasional power crunch. In a rapidly growing economy, these effectively represent growing pains. But the power crunch across China in September and October of 2021 was different. As in other periods of unseasonably high temperatures, power-strapped grid operators accounted for an uptick in air conditioning and fans by cutting streetlights and other municipal power uses they could live without. Then they placed cuts on industrial users, notifying manufacturers and suppliers for the likes of Tesla and Apple that factory operations would have to slow for the coming week or two. While the move put a damper on the Chinese economy rallying for the first time since pandemic shutdowns, a temporary slowdown wouldn't be a major issue in the grand scheme of things. Then it got worse. Scorching droughts persisted across central China, winds unexpectedly died in the north, and across the entire country, coal reserves dwindled to a day or two's worth. Suddenly, the power crunch became rolling blackouts. For hours, Chinese cities went dark. In Laoyang, cars stacked up when traffic lights shut off, and metal workers ended up in the hospital when factory exhaust systems shut down. Shops ran by candlelight, city advised residents to stock up on clean water, building managers asked tenants to take the stairs, while at least one family got stuck in an elevator when power suddenly cut out. The international media called it unprecedented, and some Chinese citizens compared the outages to living in North Korea. To understand the true source of the crisis, beyond the short-term simple supply and demand imbalance, one must understand China's electric grid, and to understand its grid, one must understand this. Coal is everything. The two other areas with similar GDPs, Europe and the US, produce about 18 and 21% of their electricity with coal, respectively. In China, it's 62%. In fact, about half of the entire world's coal power generation capacity is within the People's Republic. In context, this isn't surprising. 2 or 3 decades ago, coal was far more significant in Europe and the US's energy mix, but in the years since, there's been a notable shift towards cleaner, more flexible natural gas-fired power plants. China couldn't do that, at least not easily. One of the country's critical weaknesses in today's world is that it lacks significant domestic oil and gas production. It imports about half of the natural gas it uses, which means it's expensive, which means it doesn't use the fossil fuel for generating electricity, at least in any significant way. Meanwhile, China is swimming in coal. Enormous deposits sit in Inner Mongolia and the Shaanxi and Shaanxi provinces. The country has more natural coal deposits than anyone but Russia, Australia, and the US. Many forms of renewable electricity generation are now cost competitive with coal and gas generation, but remember, China has been growing unbelievably, unprecedentedly fast. While the overall cost per kilowatt hour of solar, for example, might be the same or lower than that of coal power, there's the question of when the money is spent. With solar, nearly all of the cost is upfront in the production and installation of panels. With coal, however, the cost is more distributed through the lifetime of use. There's a lower initial installation cost per unit of capacity, but it raises through time with use as coal has to be purchased to keep the generation ongoing. So, when a country is growing at such a pace, it's much easier to spend less upfront to add capacity, knowing that more money is coming, rather than spend a larger amount upfront knowing the savings will come later. It's that simple reality that has undergirded the centrality of coal in China's energy mix. Now, the companies actually producing power in China are almost universally state-owned enterprises, but despite reporting up to the central government, on a day-to-day basis, these businesses do act with a certain degree of autonomy, responding to market conditions similar to how a privately owned enterprise would. But this is a unique market.